You're tuned in to Women in America, the podcast that dives deep into the issues shaping gender equality in the U.S. and beyond. Hosted by Pari and Eve, public health professionals by day, content creators by passion, we bring you expert insights, compelling stories, and actionable strategies to push the fight for equality forward. This season, Rights at the Crossroads unpacks the intersections of reproductive rights and gender justice in today's America.
On this episode of Women in America, we chat with entrepreneur Lisette Calvero about starting your own business, navigating motherhood, and finding balance. Let's dive in.
Today, we're going to be joined by Lisette Calvero, who I was actually put in touch with via a mutual friend. And I'm really excited to dive in with her because, you know, when you've been hearing about somebody for a year and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I finally get to meet this amazing, incredible, wonderful person in real life, or at least on Zoom. And I'm pretty pumped about it. So Lisette, why don't you say hi to the people and tell us a little bit about what you're about?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I actually think the best relationships are always someone connected you to someone.
Yeah.
So I'm also equally excited to finally connect. But I'm Lisette. I'm a full-time content creator and business owner. I own a creator company, Influence with Impact, and we essentially do creator education, how to monetize. We also have services like coaching and talent management. And I've been a full-time creator now for 13 years, which is kind of crazy. So not Gen Z, even though I feel and look like it. Okay. And for me, my platform has always really been about how to market yourself as a creator, how to use your voice and your platform. So lots of obviously synergies in that, and Latina myself. So, lots of layers here.
Yeah, I love that. And, as a fellow creator, I feel like there's a lot of things that we could talk about in terms of your actual agency. But I think today I would love to focus more on you as a person and as a woman, as someone navigating life in America. You're an entrepreneur, you're a parent, you're a woman, you're an immigrant, you're a person of color, and all of that in this new normal is somehow being challenged. I say somehow because it's nonsensical that it is challenged, but here we are. So tell me a little bit about your entrepreneurship journey, because I am obviously a creator, as our audience knows, but I do have a full-time job in reproductive health advocacy, which I will admit, initially, I've been working in reproductive health for 15 years. And initially, I started it because, it's something I think I could really just be passionate about till the day that I die. Truly. Yeah. Someone could, crack me awake at 4 a.m. and I'll be like, women deserve rights. That'll be, what I'll say.
Yes.
But I think I'm, going through my own, personal, questioning journey, because public health is being destroyed. Reproductive health is being destroyed. I often ask myself, have I built my 15-year career for us to be able to do nothing moving forward? So I would love to hear from you and your experiences. Why did you decide to go out on your own? What has been your journey? And then even just what you've kind of loved and hated about the process. Because I think most of the time when people talk about entrepreneurship, they see the glamorous side. And I think that most people don't understand that in order to achieve the glamorous side, you actually have to go through a lot of hardship first. So would love to just kind of hear whatever you have to share about that.
100%. So very interesting. And I think this is also, anyone who's a child of immigrants knows, my parents were you go to university, you study this thing, and you get a job in this thing. And that's it. And I got a degree in public relations, Florida State University, shout out. And that's what I thought I was going to do the rest of my life. I never had any interest or thought that I would start a business, that I'd be an entrepreneur. I also think it was very important that I actually never saw someone like me starting a business like mine. I didn't really have a lot of those role models or experiences to look at back in the day. And so I started my career in, again, public relations, because I was always the token millennial or younger person in a lot of advertising roles. They would have all the social media or creator things get assigned to me. And this is back in the day when people were blogging. That was the thing. It wasn't Instagram yet. And so I kind of fell into becoming this expert in all things influencer marketing. And I continued that path in my career. 7 years in, I would say, that's when I first started questioning, should I just go off on my own? And one of the reasons was I felt like I was starting something new and building programs from scratch for all these big corporations and not really getting anything beyond saying I worked at these big corporations, one of the biggest agencies I worked for, they still use my strategy. They still use this department I set up.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And I'm I don't get anything from that. No royalties. So I was you know what? I'm gonna start my own thing. But what is so funny is I had no business plan, idea, idea. I've never taken a business class in my life, right? So I really just winged it. And for me, I thought if I can do this for a year, I'll keep going. I will say transparently, very important, finance. I, at that point of leaving, was kind of like pretty close to paying off student loans, had an emergency fund, so I really did wait until I felt like financially I wasn't going to be scared for the next 3 to 6 months. And I gave myself that timeline of if within a year this is profitable, if within a year I'm making a sustainable amount of money, let me keep going. So it was one of those like, let's try it and keep going. And I feel like even now, 5 years later, I just have kept going. And the way that we've kind of grown our business is just focusing on people, focusing on our clients, making sure we're delivering a really good experience. And then for me, continuing to show up online from this lens that I always have has of course led people to us. But it's been a lot. And again, back to Daughter of Immigrants, it was a lot at first to just wrap my mind around. People talk about imposter syndrome, but for me, it was like, I did not believe this was possible. And I just couldn't even see a path for this, which is why I had this energy of like, just keep going, just see what happens, because I didn't really know what was possible. And and even speaking of, my parents were always like, what are you doing again? Why are you leaving your corporate job? Are you okay? It wasn't up until after I gave birth to my daughter, and we'll probably get into stuff like that, but my mom came to live with us to help for a little bit. And she was like, actually, you work really hard. And I'm like, duh, you leave the 9 to
What did you think before?
you leave the 9 to 5 to work 9 to 9. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, we experience as creators often, but it's probably true of all entrepreneurs. It's like when you're the one running the business or you're doing it for you and you are your own boss, one of the cons of that is that like there is no fixed workday, right? Like you have to be kind of on the whole time. It's almost like being a parent, actually. Like there is no fixed workday. And so tell me about, how old is your daughter?
She is a year and a few months.
Oh, okay. So like still relatively new to the world.
Oh yeah. Still.
How are you juggling that? Because I have a 6-month-old and I frankly am barely holding on some days. Like I'll be frank about that. Like the transition from, like parenting into working full time while parenting is not an easy one, especially not in a society like ours. And I would say having a baby right before the Trump administration starts is a hard do not recommend. So,
oh yeah.
So, I'm like, even if I wasn't doing a full-time job plus the second full-time job of being an advocacy-based creator and then also being a parent, it's like, oh, I think living these last 6 months of the Trump administration would have been challenging regardless, but then doing so as a new mom is like impossible. So I'm curious how you've been feeling managing your own business, being, a parent to like what is now probably your number one priority. And so tell us a little bit about that, like balance and how you find your way.
Yeah. I mean, in America, it is not for the weak and it is pretty wild. So I will say as an entrepreneur and as a Virgo for all my astrology friends, I planned my maternity leave, which I called faux maternity leave because, it's kind of fake and within the resources that we were given here, pretty much like 5 months ahead. And I even had my team test this idea of like, if I wasn't here, spend 2 weeks if I wasn't here and kind of tested it out to, make sure things were refined. And so I really did feel like right after giving birth, I definitely felt a little bit of a break and a disconnect from working, exactly executing day to day and doing all of those things. Very lucky that I live in Colorado. So we do have paid family leave here. I was able to take advantage of that for 3 months based off of the salary that you pay yourself as a self-employed person. And I took that time to I wasn't saying I have a boundary. I'm not opening my emails. I'm not working. I actually used it to work very slow and allow myself to almost transition throughout those 3 months. 3 to 4 months, really. And so what that taught me was, hey, my business can stay afloat without me. But financially, if you rely on your team more, that means I'm paying my team more because we are paying them equitable wages. And that's great. But that means my household income decreases, which if you keep doing the math, that means my business better grow so that the profit margin is back to what it was while I was like very actively working inside my business. So I would say the financial elements of running a business that that can run itself, but when you have team members, people are going to want raises, people are going to want to grow their career. So your business still has to grow even if you want to slow down. And I feel like the growing the business part is what energetically drains me the most. So I will definitely say the most challenging is just that energy of constantly feeling like you have to sell or put yourself out there, because if you don't, am I going to get new clients? And then of course, daughter is here. And for me, I really did, even again, that break that I took, it was a moment where I slowed down and I was really able to be present and able to enjoy. One of my selfish reasons, I feel like there is no selfless reason to have kids, but one of my selfish reasons was that I really wanted to like see the world differently. And that's something that she has given me, especially now as a toddler, being able to say, wow, like she thinks this is the coolest thing in the world that she's ever seen. And it's like a remote control. And so those moments of really allowing me to slow down, to just appreciate living in the present, I think you could achieve that without children. And for me, it was so nice to kind of get that. It helped my business, because then I was able to say, this isn't that serious, right? So I think the balance, again, energetically, way more draining. I was just talking to my therapist where she's like, by the way, you're functioning at like 5%, okay? So start saying no to a bunch of things that are way too much for you. And that's just the reality. My brain capacity is so much less than what I had before, but I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about prioritization, right? Like, I think that, you said like there isn't really any selfless thing about having kids.
Yeah.
It is interesting because I think there's actually two ways of looking at this.
Yeah.
And I go back and forth depending on the day, because I think of both are valid schools of.
Yeah.
I both think it is extremely selfish to have children and also extremely selfish to not have children. Like, it is selfish to do both of those things, which inherently means that there is selflessness also involved in both of those decisions.
Yeah, I love that.
The way I see it is like climate change is a significant problem that we are experiencing. The rising wave of conservatism globally is a huge problem. If the right people are having children and raising those children to be empathetic, caring, impactful, intelligent individuals, there is actually a selflessness associated with that, because we are, I'm going to say we as in the royal we, are raising the next generation of potential protectors of this planet, right?
Amazing.
And I know that for some folks that seems counterintuitive, because it's like, well, we may have reached a point with climate change that there is no return.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, I used to think that that was a fully insulated argument. But the older I've got, I've realized that unfortunately, there are powerful, rich people that control multiple facets of the world, right? And unless you are truly in like the 0.1% of global society, you're never going to be able to have that kind of influence.
Yeah.
So if we can reliably say that the 0.1% is acting in the interest of only themselves, it is up to the rest of the 99.9% of us to actually be able to change what they are doing, right? And I think that that is where every next generation comes in as like the new group of fighters. I will say, even though I just like went ahead and said that, I also do look at my baby daughter and apologize to her every day for bringing her into this world when what the news is what it is, right? At the same time, I try to remind myself, especially on the hard days, that like I have to do everything I can to equip her to be the change.
Yeah.
So I would push back on you and say that there is also selflessness involved with raising, especially a daughter at this phase in time,
I agree. And it's to your point, I think every decision we make for ourselves inherently is we're making it for ourselves, so it's selfish, but there's a selflessness that you're kind of giving up, don't really agree on absolutes either, but yeah.
But I wanted to say that I think that the way you phrased it is kind of beautiful, because when people talk about entrepreneurship, especially like women entrepreneurs and women being leaders in their fields, we often think about it as like it comes at the sacrifice of something else, right? Which is true, I think, in general for people, is like you cannot be good at any one thing unless you are dedicating a certain amount of hours to it. And I can't remember who it was that said it, but it was like 10,000 hours is what you need to do on one skill in order to be perfect at it, right?
Yeah.
And that it is simply not possible for a single human to do that at everything. But I also think that it is a perfectly acceptable line of thought. And that is what gets lost often in like the women in leadership conversation, where it's like at different phases of your life, there are different things that are taking the 10,000 hour position. And then there's this different thing that's taking like position number two. And the truth is that if you are a parent, your family and child should always be the number one position. Whether or not that's true for everybody remains a mystery. But I think that the way you put it is lovely, because like oftentimes when folks are really starting out, they think about like this business is them, right? And they are the brand, they are the business, and they are everything. But the true measure of success is actually, I think, something you said, which is like when you get to a certain point, can your business sustain without you? And that is when you, I think, are more able to do sort of like analysis of self, or basically like evaluation of like, how have I done to be able to say like, okay, now my business is sustaining or my staff are sustaining. And I think that that's incredible. And I appreciate you sharing like one of the lessons and the transparency around that. So when you were like going through your business journey, were you thinking about the fact that you wanted to have a family and how that aligned, or did it happen kind of organically for you?
The conversation about having kids, it was kind of organic. My husband and I, at the time, we were like, so is building a family something we want to get on right now? And I think it was definitely influenced. At the time we started thinking about it, I had turned 30, and I was like, society puts this pressure on you that once you're 30, like the biological clock is ticking, which is awful, but that's kind of what made me even start to question, like, do I need to start now, And I do feel like that pressure was also very heavy in my culture. A lot of people in my culture are having kids in their 20s, and then you have people asking, hey, when are you getting started? So it was organic, but also pressured in many ways. And I would say that was kind of midpoint of me having my business just for a few years. And this is an interesting thing. I didn't question how I would do both. I sort of was like, if I've been winging it, I think I can probably wing this as well. And once we finally got pregnant for the first time, because I did end up having a loss, I actually was very anxious. I remember I recorded this video when I found out I was pregnant, and I was sobbing through it, saying, I'm really scared. I don't know if I made a mistake. I don't know if this is the right moment, the right thing for me. So I actually think that, you're never ready to have a kid. You just you're like, I think I want to have one now, but you're never fully as knowledgeable or ready until it really happens. And I remember I was very much panicking and thinking, what have I done? So I'm just being honest about that. We ended up sadly having a loss. And then I think that allowed me the space to really reevaluate what needs to change in my life so that I don't feel panic anymore. And that's the first time I started again to have these feelings of, all right, let me make sure that I have a stacked team, right? Like I want to make sure I have a team of people who I trust, who are going to come in and support, because eventually I'm going to have to go on maternity leave. So just all of those pieces, but definitely was very scared at first. And this was not in any way planned strategically,
Yeah. Do you think, first of all, I'm so sorry that you experienced that. I don't think that people understand just how common it is for people to have a loss, because for some reason, whether it's a spontaneous miscarriage or an intentional abortion, there are, like so many people in the country, in the world that go through these experiences. And for some reason, there's so much shame associated with them that people don't. I believe the stat most recent is that 20% of women in the US experience a miscarriage, which is like 1 in 4, essentially 1 in 5.
Yeah. And, that we know of that have
exactly.
reported it.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. I was actually going to add that in, is because especially now that women who are having miscarriages are not even getting miscarriage management, the way that they're being reported is totally different. So I'm pretty sure that in a few years, people are going to think, oh, the rate of miscarriages in the US has decreased, but that's actually not going to be the case at all. It's just going to be that they fudged the way that they record it, right? Yeah. But going back to like the point that I was trying to make is that I feel like I'm really proud of you actually for sharing that, because I think a lot of women feel like they have to hold it close, or like that it's something about them that they did wrong, or they made this weird decision, or whatever it is. And I really feel like we need to be doing a better job of just getting rid of all of the stigma around that, because I think that's part of the reason why there's so much stigma on abortion is because there's also stigma on these other very naturally occurring processes, because abortion is the same process that is required to get rid of a miscarriage, right? So I am genuinely sorry you experienced that. Do you feel like some of the fear or the panic that you were experiencing when you found out you were pregnant was because of the business, or do you feel like it was because of like, oh my gosh, my like life and identity is shifting and I'm not sure if I've like really stepped into this the way that I had intended to?
100% think it was identity. And what's so silly is we started off that year, we were like, we would like to have children this year. So unless you're really strategically planning for it, it was a surprise, like, wow, we got pregnant this month. But I wasn't concerned about the business yet. It was more so, oh my God, my life, right? So not specifically thinking of that one piece, but of course it's part of the greater. And I think if that pregnancy had obviously continued through to term, I'd probably still feel the same level of anxiety like throughout, right? And the second pregnancy came with a different anxiety. It was, will I lose this pregnancy? So, it is something that, to your point, all we see is the announcements and wow, the celebration, which is valid. All, babies should be celebrated and it's great, but there's oftentimes a lot of panic or a lot of, am I about to lose my identity? Am I about to change something in a way that I don't have capacity for? Which, to your point, like I've always been very much an advocate for reproductive rights, but specifically after having a miscarriage, I was like, imagine if I didn't have the option, right? Imagine if I didn't have the opportunity to say, this is not the right time for me, or hey, I ended up having a loss and this is the route that I need to take in order to protect my health.
Yeah. I mean, there are legitimately now states where that is not an option anymore, right?
Yes.
Which anyone with common sense would stop and say, like, that's batshit crazy. Like to tell a woman who's had a miscarriage that she has to then see this pregnancy that does not exist anymore to term because she's not able to get care. I bring this up because just this week, a woman in Texas was denied miscarriage management care because even though she was experiencing a ton of problems, the fetus still had electrical pulses. And so according to the law, that counts as a heartbeat. And for those who are doing the audio version of this podcast, I very much use quotation marks when I say heartbeat because it is not a heartbeat. But she was denied care by 3 different facilities. And then she experienced sepsis as a result of that and died. And she was only 22.
Yeah.
And what is amazing to me is like, as someone who actually thinks that women are people and has the radical idea, has the radical idea that women deserve reproductive rights, I am like, okay, batshit crazy, anti-choice people obviously cannot relate to me, but like then ask yourself, if you're one of them, what you think you are gaining from losing a 22-year-old woman who wants a child in the future, right? You're denying her care because she's experiencing a medical emergency. And basically what I'm saying is that like our country has reached a stage of complete and total insanity when it comes to this issue. And it's so shameful because it's because of this tiny, tiny percentage of people that don't even have any justification for this. They just want to control women, right? Pew Research Center did this study recently that found that basically 80% of Americans believe that abortion should be fully available and legal in most circumstances. And if you read that study and if you were aware of American culture right now, you would think that they were talking about 2 totally different things because it's like, wait, if more, not just more than half, but like the majority, 80% of us think this way, then why are like our laws something else, right? So I think it's like so valuable for you to like point out to people that the reason why you have been able to even achieve your entrepreneurship goals, your business goals, all of like your goals for your life is because Colorado offered you this very sensible care option, right? When you needed it. And it's unfortunate that you needed it, but how much more unfortunate would have been if it became totally life-threatening in that situation. It's alarming because like we see over and over and over again that reproductive autonomy is so critical for women's economic freedom, for women's religious freedom, for women's like liberty and just like true empowerment. And that is such a big reason why they want to take it away, right? Because they should not really be able to access the same opportunities that everybody else is. So I'm really glad that you beat the system because that is so critical.
By a margin.
But now you're also like, you're able to be a very present and well-informed and well-intentioned parent for your child. And that is more important than anything, right? So
Yeah.
how have you been balancing being a full-time business owner and also a mom?
Yeah. How have I? The privilege of health, and I
Yeah.
don't think we talk about that enough or at least identify how much of a privilege that is. We both work from home, my husband and I. He's working part-time. It was, again, another taboo, right? That I would have to stop working as much. And
Mm.
I'm so lucky that I have a partner who does not care about that stuff in terms of the traditional sense of gender norms that at least our culture puts on. And he would work part-time to support with childcare a little bit more intentionally. And so we thought this is great. Like we could just do this until she goes to preschool, universal preschool in Colorado.
Oh,
But
that's amazing.
yeah, but that did not work out in terms of time. And as a new mom, babies, especially after like when they're holding up their head a little, they just become people and you have to make sure you're watching them. And it's hard to intentionally focus and be present, right? When you're refocusing on work. So what we did is we hired a nanny who would help us for half days. And that has been life-changing because essentially we're able now to even create a schedule for ourselves as an entrepreneur. Sometimes you kind of have crazy days where you're working a lot one day or not so much the other, but we know when this person comes, this is our focus time to get work done and also take care of ourselves. Because I think that that's just something, this is like an in-between, right? It's not just balancing work and baby, it's as a human being, I need to make sure I take care of myself because our life and our time is so much more limited. So let's say my schedule will look like I try to schedule calls and things like that during the time I know that she's here. I will go get some movement in. So I'm a big rec center fan. Use your local community. So I go to the rec center and I like get some movement done. And then I come back refreshed enough to like keep working. But now that we have that half day, my husband's able to kind of take time again to do the same. He will support a lot more, in terms of like splitting the day. He does support a lot more with watching her so I can continue to get work done. But it really is about time blocking and then also knowing your boundaries. I know, for example, if I have 4 calls in a day, I'm going to be so drained that I'm not going to even be able to be present for my daughter. So now, lock in my time and I may be less available, but I just know my own limits to be able not to burn out. Saying no, making sure that I prioritize things that are actually making us money versus things that are nice to haves or marketing. So yeah, day by day, but I feel like it's nearly impossible to do it by yourself, whether you have family, the resources to have someone come around. But yeah.
I have to say, hearing you talk, I'm starting to feel like this chat is much more useful for me than it might be for our audience because my child just turned 6 months old. And, the thing about babies, and for folks who are parents, they're probably much more familiar with this than I am because I'm just starting out, but they go through phases, which is totally normal. But the challenge as a parent is as soon as you get used to one phase and you're like, oh, I've got this on lock, I can handle this, blah, 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 things change. Like she started teething. She's reached the point where I have to hold her now, otherwise she gets a little bit upset. And my life has gone from being like, okay, I think I can do this to now feeling like I'm on the edge of a cliff and like even a single rock crumbles, I'm gone, And so it's like, I'm really appreciating hearing you say this because frankly, I think your advice applies not just to women entrepreneurs, but just to women in general. Like we live, unfortunately, in a society that is so hyper individualistic, right? We have been taken out of the norms of what used to exist. Like the generations before us did not do this in silos. They did this in communities. They did this in villages. Like when we say like it takes a village, that phrase exists for a reason. And so I have been finding for myself that postpartum has been a very lonely experience because it's like, not only are you navigating this whole new version of yourself, you are now never going to be your first priority again, right?
Yep.
And you are also navigating living in a society that is getting more expensive every day. So you have to think about how much time can you take off work and so on and so forth. But then also like there's this child and you're figuring out how to parent and how to sort of teach and learn and all of this stuff while also simultaneously trying to maintain your personhood. And so I am resonating very deeply with what you're sharing because it's like, I feel like I have been telling my husband recently, I'm like, if we don't figure out something, like there's going to be a massive chasm and something's going to snap and everything's going to come crumbling down. So So basically what I'm saying is women are superheroes. And the problem with that is that we expect ourselves to do too much and we normalize doing all of it by ourselves when realistically it's actually not possible. And we need to be able to step back and say, hey, I need help here. So I genuinely appreciate you saying that. And
yeah, it is so funny. We're like, oh, we could do this. And we're like, what were we thinking?
Yeah, especially because, like, for example, my child's like, you know, when she's awake now, I don't want to be on my phone. I don't want to be on my laptop working beside her because I'm like, hey, this is actually kind of defeating the purpose of even parenting because, like, now I'm not doing either one well. I'm not doing my job well and I'm not being your mom well. So, like, I'm basically doing myself a disservice by trying to think that, like, I can hold it all. Yeah. And at the same time, you're like, but I feel guilty about spending the money when we barely have any coming in. You're just like, oh my God, I can't win in any scenario. So I love that you're like, no, you really have to set boundaries and decide like what it is that's possible in every circumstance. And then like really live into that possibility. And, you know, like give yourself the grace of saying like, I am actually doing the right thing. Like there is, I should not be feeling guilt as a woman or as a mom that I'm working or that I'm choosing to do this just because I have a child, because like that is what the time and this phase and this environment demands of me, you know?
Yeah.
I very much appreciate that. I would love for you to close out by just sharing with us like what have some of like your best moments been in terms of like, you know, deciding to do this on your own and related to like influence with impact your company or just like being a parent, and then let the audience know where they can find you across all platforms.
Yeah. Oh, best moments. I think for me, just it's the way my personality works, but being recognized for my work is very valuable. I think I was raised in this culture of, you know, in Spanish we say calladita se ve más bonita, and it basically means like shrink yourself. And for me, I've really worked a lot, you know, over the last decade plus to not shrink myself. So when I am, you know, asked to speak on stages about creator economy, or if I'm, you know, featured in an article, like those for me are big wins. They're all vanity. They don't matter for a lot of people, but for me, it's a self-growth moment.
Yeah.
Allowing
it's validation.
Yeah, I'm like, I need validation to be seen. I think with motherhood, for me, the happiest and the wins are the level of trust I've developed in myself as a human. And I think in many ways, again, with business.
I love that.
Yeah, it's, you know, saying, hey, you thought you couldn't do this? Yes, you could. Look how strong you actually are. You don't have to show up into every single project. Your team's got it. So the level of trust in myself and what I've built has been really valuable. And I don't think that would have happened without this life change of having to put my focus outside of, like, being forced to focus outside of work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's beautiful. I feel like most people say like, oh, it's like changed me as like being able to be there for someone else. But I love that your strength was like, no, I like believe in myself more. And that is like badass as fuck. So that actually like made me a little bit emotional. So I appreciate that.
I appreciate you.
Let people know where they can find you online.
Yeah, I'm at Lisette Calv. I'm sure you'll see my name spelling here. And I talk all things creator economy and motherhood and entrepreneurship.
Yay. Thank you so much, Lisette. This was a beautiful conversation and I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Women in America. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your network and don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For additional resources, follow us on social media at Gemma_talks. See you next week.